I'm happy to introduce Daryl and Verna Leipold. They have a shop in the Excelsior area with the same name, and they've been at this for well over 40 years.
Yep, 47 almost.
And the connection here, Laverna is Bev Gross's and Lucy Brown, Lucy Spicer's cousin. They both have so your dad and Lucy's dad, Bev's dad, were
Brothers. Yep,
and so she grew up in the Afton area. So
that's right.
so we're glad to have them here.
Okay, thank you. Let's get started. What do you need us to do?
Well, first of all, are there a lot of people that have things with them out there as well as what's put up here, so we kind of have a little better idea? Are there other items? We just kind of.
Got it all up there.
They've got it all up there. Okay. That's kind of what we wanted to know first, I guess, so we know where we're at. And so we will talk about any of these items and answer any other questions with them that we can. And remember, we're not Antiques Roadshow, but we probably have a little knowledge of some of the various things, and we can maybe direct you in other places where to go to look or to find other information. But we can kind of start at one end of the table and kind of progress along and
Would like me to be a person that owns it could bring it to you, or else?
yeah,
You can start with that.
sure.
Well, I'd like to say a few words before. Many of the things that we would talk about that people bring, there's several ways of looking at it. One way is that you would not have brought it if you weren't interested in it. And so you're looking to see if we're interested in it, if we think it's something special. Everything that you brought is probably special to you and has some significance to you. And so when we comment on some things, some we're very familiar with, because there tends to be a type of thing that people will bring from home. And so there's some similarities from time to time. And what is interesting is something special that's a little different, but has a history. And so if we look at something and you say, well, I have this and this is the history of it. This was my great-grandmother's and we've kept it in a case, and we were going through the attic and we found it up in the attic and we said, well, what is it? Well, maybe you can just look at it and tell what it is. But we might be able to comment. I'd like to comment on one more thing, is John Sochet. I'm probably the only one in the room that knew him personally. He was an art teacher at my dad's school in Minneapolis. And somewhere I have a piece or two of his work. I haven't looked at it for years, but he was an interesting person. During the Depression years, he was part of the art program, you know, the WPA, Workmen's Progress Association, but also through that, they had artists doing artwork, they had writers doing writing and such, and they got paid for it. And Mr. Sochet was part of that. And so the couple pieces that I have, he did in the 30s as part of the government program. So it's interesting. When we came last year, see, I didn't know it was there, and it was interesting. I didn't know he was from St. Paul Park here. And so it has a double meaning, at least to me. And that kind of ties in a bit with what you would bring. You see, if that was small and you brought it and I brought it to something, I'd say, well, it's Mr. Sochet. And he was an art teacher and he did this and did that, and I'd like to show it to you. And somebody may comment and say, well, yes, I know of his works and it was significant and such. And so anything that is done, if you can build a story about it, it becomes. They want to start with this. And I looked at it and I said, well, it's a spittoon, and the one I have is red and not blue. Otherwise, it's the same thing. Tobacco, particularly up into the 20s, and if we want to go back, say, pre-Prohibition to 1910, 1915, and you went into the local bar, where would this be? This would be on the floor, generally near the bar or someplace. And cast iron ones are interesting. You do find them in brass. And I've seen original, there's reproductions in brass. And the reproduction says Wells Fargo on it. And it's a reproduction. Wells Fargo never had original like that. This we determined, and I didn't give a thought on it, but I know metal casting, and you cannot cast this in one piece because a match plate has part of it on the bottom of the plate and the top on top of the plate, and it's put into the sand, and you gate it, and you pour in your metal, either ferrous or non-ferrous. It's a ferrous metal, and then you pull it apart. Well, you can't pull this apart, so most likely it's a three-piece, bottom, top, and this part. Then it would be welded together in porcelain. The age of it, it can be turn of the century, and now we have turned another century, so really we have to say that us older turn of the century means 1899 to actually not 1899, 1900 to 1901 is the turn of the century. 1900 is still the other century. And so, but that's what it is. And they faded away after Prohibition. You know, they were still around, but the old bar that had sawdust on the floor and they made their own whiskey. A great uncle on my mother's side, father had a bar in St. Paul, and they made their own whiskey. They bought the alcohol and they colored it with caramel color and they added a little bite to it. He said a little fusel oil you had to be in there, give it a little bite, and that was your nickel liquor. And I can imagine that if it came from St. Paul, it could have been from a relative bar.
And by the way, in Excelsior, there's a bank, which is a bank again now, the last 20 years or so, and long ago it was also a bank. And when they remodeled it, they wanted it to look more authentic with the floor and that sort of thing. And they did put a spittoon, which looks similar to this. It probably isn't an old one, but it's a heavy-duty type one. They did put one of those next to one of the counters where you can stand there and write out your deposit slip. So for authentication, they did that in Excelsior.
Not all the people that chewed tobacco had a good aim. As a result, it got kind of messy on the floor.
If people would be feeling like they were going to knock it over, they couldn't knock one like this over very well because it is quite heavy.
And we rather comment on what something is and the value. Value is between somebody who wants to sell it and somebody who wants to buy it, and it can vary greatly.
And values are quite fluctuating nowadays compared
nowadays,
to maybe what they used to be.
The market has changed greatly in the last 10, 15 years. The thing is that you show it to a 22-year-old and they don't know what it's for, you see? And that's the problem on many of the, it's an interesting one. If it was red, I'd be interested in it because then I could have a pair of them.
Yeah. I suppose we should look at something else here.
Yeah, we gotta move on.
Yeah.
The whole thing, would this
Yeah.
be appropriate?
Yeah, yep.
And
That's
It looks
quite-
like some handcuffs and police work items of different ages. This one was interesting because I know of it. You would put it around the person's wrist like that, and then you could drag them and pull them along. And I don't think that's very common at all.
He was referring to it, I believe, as a come-along,
Yeah.
which would be a proper term.
And there are collectors of them. I'm not they like the early stuff and the early on the different. A lock like this is meant for the outside. That's why it has the cover. And this is interesting. Fort Smith Prison,
Oh, wow.
Arkansas. So that's a nice example. You find railroad ones like this and around, and has the keys. Keys are hard to find, and they're hard to fit like this. And I have a whole string of keys similar to this, hundreds of them, and somebody will bring a lock in and you won't find a single key on there to fit. But the railroads, this is a nice item as far as the prison one. And it would be interesting just what it locked up. You know, your cells themselves would, and I have some of those keys with a big key like this. You twist it. And so they probably use this to change something to something.
Good story that you could make up about it would be that it was used in the Stillwater prison, in the old prison up there, which is the County Historical Society, and that the Younger brothers had something to do with it. You know, you could make up quite a story about it if you really wanted to. Because they were, all three of them there as inmates.
It wasn't one of the Younger brothers, it was Carpus, I think. They asked him why he robbed banks. He said, well, of course. He said, that's where the money is. But it would be interesting if it had a local connection. And it's an interesting group of them, you see. This one most likely, they like to put the people in back. They wanted the hands in back, and most likely this was used in that. The quick one that a policeman carried would be a pair similar to this, or to this other set right here, would be similar. But it's interesting, all of these are kind of heavy-duty ones, and so they have special interest. People really like to collect handcuffs, police items.
At one time, I imagine there was a book on police collectibles. We have a lot of books on antiques that we're really trying to sell out right now, but I don't remember if we ever had one on law enforcement collectibles. But I was going to mention too, if you're interested in books that are available, Schiffer, which is a company out in Pennsylvania, is one of the few companies that's still publishing a lot of books on antiques. So if you want to look for something, go to your computer and look up Schiffer, SCHIFFER, I believe it is, Schiffer Publishing, and you can probably, that would lead you to their publications on antiques. They publish other books too, but just to mention that in case you're into trying to find good books like that nowadays, which are not as easy to find. Okay.
Well, that's Ford part list.
Oh, yeah.
1928-32, that'd be, it says V8 N4 cylinder. Of course, the 28 was the first model year of the Model A. There were two Model A's, of course. Henry Ford's first company, actually not his first company, the present company is his third company. But he started that company in 1903, and he called the car a Model A. Then there was the Model B, Model AC, and then he ran up, and the last one then in 1908 was the Model S, and of course, you know what came after that, the Model T. But the V8 then came out in 1932, it was called the Model 18. And this is effective December 20th, 1932. Let me see, I was 6 months old at that point. And they are useful. The parts books, they do reproduce them, but the originals are much interesting because they're better quality. The pictures are better. And so that is...
I have here a little model.
I thought it would be bigger.
Well, let's see what that is.
Well, there's a clue on the...
Well,
it says a little...
Yeah, what it is, it's the... In 1932, they came out with a new body style, but the coupe, the one that the doors open from the back, was a reworked Model A body. But in 1932, they came out with a new body with what we call a suicide door. It opened from the front. And that's what this depicts right here. And it's a V8, so it'd be a Model 18. The four-cylinder was still made in 32 and was called a Model B. And the only thing, a problem on this one is that the radiator shell was on a 32 was always painted. It was never nickeled or chromed. The Model A was. Our 1931 Roadster and has a stainless steel shell. Our Model A pickup truck in 31 has a painted shell because the commercial was that. It'd be nice. A friend of mine who's from Stillwater has one of these just like this, but the real one. And that would be fun to have. It's a nice model.
I will,
What do we have here?
yeah, I will give
That's just the,
Oh, that's the deal for that, yeah.
I will give the model to the First Lady. It's Mother's Day. That successfully tells me what is the date of the Ford's first V8.
What is the question?
The first year of the, you said it here, so.
Yeah, 1903.
First lady that can tell us
Oh,
the date.
1903.
Or the V8.
Nancy got it.
the
You want
8,
the V8?
the
I want
V8,
V8.
yeah.
Oh,
I'm not a woman, so I can't say.
Find out whether they were listening or not.
Well, it's the hint is on the license plate here.
Bernie, give it to the woman with all the kids. Give it to them.
All right, I'll come back.
All right, let's get on to the rest of the
Oh my gosh,
All right.
all our kids with her.
The quilt is one of them?
okay.
All right.
The 32 was the first V8 for Ford. And it was the engine was redone for 33. The 32 V8 was a little weak. These, yeah, go ahead.
Are you the owner of the
After
wall
I ate
hanging?
donut, just so you
Well,
know.
I couldn't find a picture, so I.
Oh, that's fine.
This was easier to find. But when we were, well,
I'll
when we
trade
were
places
first
with you.
married, I made this for my husband for our 50th anniversary.
Uh-huh.
But my,
Behind it, yeah.
There you
okay.
go.
This was our first house,
I'm gonna let go now.
okay, and it was on 80th Street, and then back in those days, 80th Street was just a gravel road. But then it got to be so busy, and my husband hated that you couldn't get out of your driveway without waiting at least 5 minutes. So well, this was the first house, and then we built onto it there. But anyway, then we moved to where we are now. And the couple, we built onto it, but the couple that, or I shouldn't say the brother and sister that owned the house, had this old stove. There, you can see it on the bottom here. That's what the antique I want to talk about. And they even heated their house with that stove. And we have that in our kitchen now. It's quite a conversation piece. And we do, my husband restored it quite a bit, you know, so that it was safe to burn. And we do burn in it when it gets cold, you know. And I've cooked soup on it and everything, but it is in our kitchen.
What make is it? What make?
Oh, gosh, I can't remember. I should check that.
Yeah, there were a number of them.
Yeah, I
in
can't
that.
remember, but it was.
There was Monarch, and there were some, in fact, there was a stove company in Shakopee, Minnesota, was there not at one time?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah, there was one in
Majestic, was
Shakopee.
there an old stove company by that name? There
Well,
were quite a few.
Technically, it's a kitchen range. A stove is what you heated with. You cooked on a range.
Well, they cooked on it, but they heated their house.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
you would get a
yeah,
lot of
it'd
heat
heat
out
the
of
house
it
Their
too.
house was
Sure.
littler. I mean, we built onto the house.
Generally, though,
Bigger now, but-
in the other part of the house, you would have a base burner.
My husband loved antiques, and he just particularly liked the stove. And so he carried pictures of it in his billfold, but I made sure he had one of me in there too.
It looks like it goes all the way to the floor? Does it have a?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the one that we had when I was a little girl, which resembled that a great deal, did not go all the way to the floor. So there were a few inches there, and we had 2 cats, and they spent a lot of time under the stove.
Oh, ours you can't get under.
So when you wanted to get them out, you had to take a broom to get them out to make them to go outside, because in the wintertime it was not any fun to go outside for them.
Yeah.
And
And
then
what,
the oven door, of course, pulled down, and so my mother would like to sit on the oven door to warm up. And so that was quite the deal.
We still put a fire in there, you know.
Oh, sure,
and,
sure.
When it gets real cold in the kitchen, it kind of helps.
well, you had a water reservoir
Yeah.
on the right-hand
Right over
side.
here is the water.
And then
Yeah.
generally, if you burn wood, it had the grates, but if you burned coal in there, you had to put your deal in and turn the grates over so that you could burn coal.
Yeah, we have done coal in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
they would turn
Yeah.
that over.
My husband kind of restored it when we got it, so it was safe to burn in.
Sure.
Yeah, and some of them then had the little shelves halfway up, and you could put something on there to warm. So
Yeah,
it'd be
that- I
off the
think that
burner,
has
you know,
too, I
off the
think, from the-
lid.
Yeah, it rolls kind of the thing on the top. And
Yeah.
I just store junk in it.
It's
but-
very
Yeah.
interesting, yes.
And then this, oh, I just wanted to say that this barn was built back in the 1800s, but we just had it was just taken down now in the last, about a year ago. But that was a really old, barn too, so, okay.
Thank you.
Now I got a
I don't know so much about Washington County, how much people value the old barns that are around, but out in Carver County, which is just southwest of where our store is, there's a lot of interest in the various barns along the various highways throughout Carver County.
Okay,
I think that's an automotive.
Yep.
That has your name on it.
That's all right.
It's probably a 1910 issue.
1908, okay.
Okay. The Woodall was a famous publisher of automotive, but also they put out handy books on carpentry and welding and all sorts of things. What is interesting about this is a generic one, in that the illustrations might be of a particular car, but it was for someone that was just learning about automobiles at that time. And so if you open it up, you'll find, like, here is a cutaway of an engine, and that'd be a four cycle one, and it explained the things.
There's a trifold page too.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
And then it's got the centerfold. That's often missing in this particular issue here. And when it also too, when you look at it here, this is before they were cast in block. And so the cylinders were cast separately, and they had a part on the top and the front that you could get at the valve. And so you turn that off. But then you could take these were bolted then to a aluminum crankcase deal. And then the individual cylinders were bolted that. It's an interesting book. The collectors have them, but generally they're looking for themselves on their particular automobile. And of course, the popular one would be the Ford automobile and the deal, but it explains, it's a nice condition. And as they say, he said this is a 1911 and I guess 1910. But it has cutaways,
Okay.
it has cutaway drawings here of it.
What were the makes of his cars?
Well,
You've never heard of one was called a Pathfinder?
well, the Pathfinder, yes, the Pathfinder was made up to, I think around 1910 or 11 to 17.
Yeah, he told me that he bought it from a dealer in St. Louis, and that 2 salesmen drove it to St. Paul to deliver it to him and to show him how to operate it.
Yeah,
They had side curtains and all that stuff. And when I was a kid, my grandpa died, I never knew him, he died 1933, I think. And in their garage, the car sat in there, he wouldn't let his sons drive it, it was too powerful.
Yeah,
So anyway, I saw they had a case of oil there, it looked like Coke bottles, they were like this tall.
oh, yeah.
Glass. And refillable. And the other car was called a Schacht, S-C-H-A-C-H-T. And a collector told me that that car, a collector has down in Redmond.
Oh,
And what was the name of it?
S-C-H-A-C-H-T, it's a German name.
we'll have to,
Shanty.
S-C-H-A-C-H-T, we'll have to look it up.
Yeah,
Because we have a good,
that one I'm not familiar with. I thought I was familiar.
That was a small one, like a runabout, he used that for his business and that. The other one was to go fishing with the
Yeah.
family car, you know.
We'd probably be able to find it on the internet, or we have a good encyclopedia of many
Back
makes
in
of
those
cars.
days, when the priest had to go out on a sick call, he called my grandfather, because the priest didn't have a car. My grandfather would take him out to wherever he had to go.
It's
And there was a
interesting.
picture I saw that showed him with a fish and another guy holding a big, long northern pipe. And I was told that the other guy there, his name was Bill Hill, and he was a brother of James J. Hill.
Ah,
They were
Indeed.
fishing buddies.
well, you can check around on that when you get to the Hill Mansion and see
Yeah, I
if
see
there's
they're gonna
credence to
tour.
that.
The Hill Mansion and the house next door is where one of the sons lived. I don't know if it was Lewis or not, and that one is a private owner, but the mansion itself is open. I was in it when the Archdiocese owned it, and they used it as their headquarters.
Okay.
And so I have a chair from there because they tossed out a lot of these nice old chairs and back, and I took one with me one time. I was principal of a private school, it was part of that. And so, but it's an interesting mansion. They had everything there. They had laundry room downstairs and such, and
And the Warehouses lived just a couple of houses away too.
Yes.
And we were at the Hill Mansion last fall, and there was a great grandson of the Warehousers there, and he talked to us during the dinner. Then he was a member of the Horseless Carriage Club that we were with. And so then he told a little bit about the connection between the Warehousers and the Hills.
Yeah,
So we got a little special side deal on that.
the Warehouses were lumber people.
I need to.
But James A. Hill got the start during the Civil War.
Let's see, are these hers?
Yes, I have a set of 6 of those glasses,
Okay.
and they came from my grandmother. I brought you my grandmother and grandfather's picture, just so you can see.
okay.
They came from the Budapest area in Hungary. My grandfather came over in 1907, came through Ellis Island. My brother has actually found his signature in the manifest there. He had enough money to get to Toledo, Ohio, and he knew one person there. And he went to that person's house, and he was having a dinner that evening, and the man who was his guest at that dinner hired my grandfather. So my grandfather was in tool and die, and he earned enough money to send and bring my grandmother over. And so they lived in Tony Paco's through MASH. Jamie Farr has mentioned Tony Paco's that still exists in Toledo today, and that was the Hungarian neighborhood. And so my brother and his 5 siblings were born in Toledo when my father. When my father was about 11 or 12, my grandfather bought a farm in northwest Ohio in the little town of Bryan. And so that's where I know my grandparents from, is in Ohio.
So this
And-
picture was taken there, is what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, that's on the farm. And then, but I know nothing about the glass, just that it came from my grandmother. And there are 6 of them.
The carnival glass like this was very common in the early 1900s, and it was kind of a takeoff on the Tiffany type glass that was not pressed glass, but was very fine art glass because of the quality of the shimmery type finish on it. And there were blues and there were golds and there were reds and so on, but they all had this luminescence about them. Now one of these is not quite as I don't know if you might say desirable or whatever, as some of those that might be a different color, maybe a red or an orange, really bright orange or a blue or a green with a lot of iridescence to it. But a set of 6 of them is quite the thing to have anyway. And they got to be known as carnival glass after it was out of fashion. It was pretty much in fashion in small gift shops and that sort of thing in the early 1900s, but then it started to be given away at carnivals and movie theaters and any place because there was a surplus of what had been made originally. And so I think it's about 4 different bowls that had belonged to my grandmother, my mother's mother. And before my mother was married, she and her brother and other people in the family, I think, went to quite a few movies, and they would get things like this. And so my mother ended up with several pieces. Hers are all this color, which isn't, but they're a deeper color. But if you have several of these and they're all in good condition, that's quite a feat for them to have lasted that amount of time, really. And by the way, if you really use one of these a lot, and you wash it and maybe use cream or something in it, the finish is going to wear off, because my grandmother also had a cream pitcher and a sugar bowl. Okay, the sugar bowl was hardly ever washed. The cream pitcher was washed all the time. And pretty soon the finish was, not pretty soon, I shouldn't say, after 20, 30 years, the finish was gone on the cream pitcher compared to what the sugar bowl was like.
What it is that around 1895, they discovered that they could flash glass with silicone. And so the first ones were pattern glass. And they used pattern glass and then dyed it. The common color was deep blue. And some of the early ones, the glass was colored also. And so it has a very deep look. And then as time went on, it became lighter and lighter. It was cheaper to have clear glass, and it was cheaper to put flash in it with later. And so as Bernie said, as it went out of favor, we call that a marigold color. When it went out of favor, they started to give it away at carnivals as prizes. And so, you can date them somewhat, is that the flashing got lighter and lighter in time. And so the pattern is nice on this one, and it's nice condition, but it's a little later piece.
They go together.
Okay. I guess you can each have one.
Okay.
Got it?
Well,
Yeah.
she can comment too.
Okay.
Does anyone know German? This is German.
Well,
Should have had my sister-in-law here,
Yes.
Mankato.
what it is that, and Laverna could talk about it, it's my understanding that you bought the cloth and it had the design printed on it. And then you did the needlework on it. And so and these are interesting because of the application. There's a lot of work on these, particularly because of the different colors. And they're framed very nice, and you can tell age of frame. In the back, if you look, it has a wood backing. And wood backings were dated pre-1900, up into the early 20s. And then they put cardboard, just board on the back. But a wood backing is a better piece. They're nice, nicely framed, and also it's remarkable that they've kept, because there's no airspace. And so if these were in a damp room or something like that, they would be molded and faded around the corners, and these aren't. So they were
Frames
very
are
well
in good
kept.
shape yet themselves.
Yeah.
And Bev has the information on the back here too, if we want to, on the one. if we
Someone
want to
read
read
it
that.
for me in German. well, I was told that they were like a wedding present. And we found these in my grandmother's attic. And evidently, they were married in 1888.
What's interesting about these, and just give me a thought, these are so well done that they may have been bought that way.
Yeah.
You know, they may have been bought from a gift shop or something like that, pre-done.
Because people may not have had the resources at
To
home
do
unless
that,
it was
yes.
included in a kit, but you don't think of kits as
I
something
don't
you would
think it's a-
buy in 1880 something like you would in
I mean,
19...
there's a month's work
70
there,
or
you see,
something.
so it's
Yeah.
very possible it was bought that way.
The translation she has here is peace and sweet harmony resides friendly under this roof. And as she mentioned, a wedding gift from 1888 to the grandparents on her mother's side of the family.
It's also interesting,
Got this, got it.
it did have newspapers on the back to do it, and what does it say here? Hastings. The newspapers from Hastings.
I bet, sure.
Yeah, right here it
Sure,
says, and so
sure.
that is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this says Norma Craft on the back.
Me, it's,
Okay.
I recently
Yeah.
hired these from a friend. She sent them to me because my son had worked at 3M and she thought that I would like to have these, it's advertising for 3M. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if there was any value in them or not, but I looked them up in eBay and yes, they are for sale, or there was one for sale on eBay. And I have that whole set, so Did it mention that this artist did work for Collier's or other magazines also in what you read?
No, I didn't, I just looked at it last night, but 1932 and 1939 are some of the dates that I,
Okay.
Well, what is interesting on this, on the other side, it's stationary, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, which become 3M. But what's also interesting is it has the NRA code at the top. And that's 1933-34, when Roosevelt, Franklin Delano, FDR was elected, when he took office in March of 33. He got Congress to do the Recovery Act, National Recovery Act. And so magazines and signs and everything, you know, came out with that. And the Supreme Court, and I think after a year or two, said it was unconstitutional. The Recovery Act was gone. But that's what the NRA, National Recovery Act.
And just about every one of these pieces of stationery has it except for two. So they must be from a different year. And this particular artist, I wish I had a copy of a Collier's magazine with me from the 30s, because I'm almost certain that this is the artist that did a number of Collier's
Yes.
covers. And there's another magazine, and I'm trying to think of the title of it. It was a smaller magazine that had a cute picture of a duck on it. And I had it up in our front window at the store, like during April. It was an April magazine, and I'm almost certain by the way that he did his signature, not even remembering his name, but the way that he wrote his name with the angle and so on, that that's the same person. But I can't say for sure, but I remember some of this art with the monkeys in some of these magazines, and also I think there were some blotters that you got that had these on. So
It's interesting, on the one side, they still have, well, NRA 34, so probably I'm off by a year of the repeal, you know, and so it was probably through 35 before it was repealed. But it's interesting, it also looks like it were made to be folded, you see, like this. It'd be interesting to know what the envelopes look like if they came with an envelope.
they may have had this little drawing on the corner, you never know. But I'm sure if a person searched some more, we could find more information about this artist.
Oh, these are
I'm
very,
certain, because
these are very nice. and remarkable that they're still around. You find something like that often, you just find a sheet or two that got put away. Okay, that's
You don't have to talk a long time about it.
No. At one time, a few years ago, everybody was buying the old typewriters just to get the ones with it, that the keys had the metal around the edges. And so nowadays, people do buy them more as a collectible.
Yeah.
But a few years back, people were just
Remington move.
getting rid of them, you know, and just using the
They're
keys and
starting
making
to
the
be
jewelry,
collectible now.
whatever.
this appears to be a portable, and it came in a black case, and then this slipped into the base of the case and was snapped in. The rubber footings are all dried out, and that is typical too. The age of it, they're 1930s type of thing up into the early 40s as far as the age. You can get ribbons for them, and they're coming back as a popular item again, and they weren't for a time. But it came in a black case that you carried like a little valise, you know.
We need to make up the mystery writer story.
Yeah.
And there were a number of companies that made typewriter ribbons, and even the little typewriter tin, or the typewriter ribbon tins are collectible.
And the Remington company was the same. They just went bankrupt, I believe, on one side. The Remington, I have some Remington guns, and so it's the same company. It became Remington Rand, and Remington Rand then changed his name beyond that, I believe. It became a technology company. And but as I say, it came in a black case originally. Oh yeah, this is it. That's Ready Kilowatt. Kilowatt. And I have not seen it in a bulb. I've seen it in other items. I have a pin that says, and it's a red figure, then the body of that is red. And the popular age of it, well, NSB became a different company beyond, and I'm not sure when they came out, but they were popular. Ready Kilowatt was popular in the 50s, very definitely.
I'm afraid to turn it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a couple shopping bags in our store that have a big picture of Ready Kilowatt on them.
Ready Kilowatt.
We've had a few other little memorabilia pieces, but everybody recognizes it as something that's extinct, so to speak. So they, when they find anything with Ready Kilowatt, they get all excited.
We were talking about this earlier as to what it is.
Holy cow,
And it,
amazing. Marine section.
well,
Naval sextant, he says.
Sextant used by the Navy to navigate over water.
it is a Navy one, then it is. Okay.
The way it works,
Marines.
you
He
measure
says
the
Navy.
angle
He says Navy.
between the surface and a celestial body.
Oh, okay.
And it's handled kind of like this. This one is set up so it can be used, you read the angle down here, you look through one of the two viewing instruments so that you can, there's a little notch here. There's a small notch here, and when you put that on the horizon, and then you move this lever, which allows you to get the height of a sun, a star. Around here, Polaris is typically at right around 45 degrees, and so by some calculation, then you can tell where you are on the Earth. Now this happens to be for the sun. There's no magnification in it. There are a number of different levers that you put out, because if you're out on the water, you need to be able to have you know, it's gonna blind you. So these are like dark glasses while you look through here. And also back through here. So these are, you can put in the number of shades that you need. There's a little magnifying glass here to allow you to read the scale, angular scale along here. And this way, you can actually tell where you are on the earth if you calculate, do the right calculations. This one is like a spyglass. And again, this is inserted here. This is used at night so that you can see the stars. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be using any of the shields unless you had a reflection off the water. But this is how naval people navigated across the world. If you ever wondered how people got from North America or any place before a lot of the current GPS, this was the way that they did it.
Actually, the colored lenses or guides, different colors would cut off different colors as you saw. So it would brighten something up or make something sharper because you're eliminating one of the colors.
Yeah.
And if you look through at clouds, a cloud could be just white, but you look through here and the cloud all of a sudden has detail to it.
Yeah.
Because you're cutting out some of the colors or some of the spectrums in the, right.
But
That's a
it
nice
was-
instrument.
Fastened in here. The reason, I bought it in Nebraska, and the story was that it was owned by a Navy person that retired in Nebraska, came out of that house. My interest in it was that I was an Air Force navigator, and in the early 70s, we were still using celestial navigation to cross the oceans north of the continent and so on. And that type of a sextant was much more modern, that had timing devices on and so on. But I've crossed many oceans, and when you don't have the navigational aids and so on, it's amazingly accurate. The computation sheet, though, to calculate is long, and I don't remember how to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm glad.
An interesting one.
There's a shop across the street from us in Excelsior that one of the people that's part of it does have some scientific instruments now and then, but otherwise you don't find them in a general antique shop that often. Or if they are, they're stuck away in some corner because nobody knows anything about them particularly. But they are a fascinating type of collectible.
Roberta, are all these things?
The other things are items that we brought just because we thought that you might enjoy seeing some little oddities that we sell in our store. But
Why don't you go over
I don't know,
this?
do you have more time or what? We can just run through some of the things a little bit if you want.
Why don't you walk over there
Yeah, I can do that.
and explain some of it? Laverna brought just a variety of things to give a little bit more of a talk about what you might find in a shop and what might be available.
I didn't bring any dishes or anything like that because a lot of those things people ignore nowadays, and they like other little odd collectibles. And you hear many people that say, oh, my kids don't like any collectibles, or they don't want anything, they want to inherit anything from me, or that sort of thing. And it's often true, but what we found, and there's a fellow that works for us now and then, and he's found it too, is that we get some of the young people in. They may be between 15 and 30 or something like that, and they, it's a couple girls or a girl and a guy or something, and they buy little things like postcards or a book with a pretty lady on the front cover or some poetry books. You know, they buy odd little things like that because they're so fascinated by our store, because we're not in a town with a lot of antique shops anymore, and they like going to something like that to see something different than what you see out of the mall. Anyway, this particular picture, it's of Mr. Sears, of Sears and Roebuck, and you might like to take a look at it later. Unfortunately, it's stained a little bit, but I bought it from one of the pickers, so to speak, that came in our store. That comes every now and then. And it appears to be an authentic signature of his. And if you want to read up on Mr. Sears,
You might comment that Mr. Sears was from Minnesota,
Redwood Falls.
Redwood Falls, and he worked on a train, and he bought a bunch of watches wholesale and sold them on the train. And it worked, so he got some more. And the business started to grow, so he needed an accountant. And Mr. Roebuck was an accountant. And so he brought Mr. Roebuck in then to take care of the record keeping. And Mr. Sears then devoted it to the retail selling. And he was one of the pioneers for mail order. You see, what had happened is that he got rural free delivery. And that made these companies. Because now anybody rural could have mail brought right to the property.
And Railway Express for bigger items like furniture wasn't that expensive either. And a lot of people live fairly close to a small town where it had railways, and it was fairly easy to get furniture and all sorts of things like that by mail. Or by railroad. This particular book that I mentioned, I just happened to bring this one because it has illustrations by Harrison Fisher, who was a well-known artist. Some of his works are a little fancier, so the books have pictures in color, but this particular one, it's just drawings, but they're quite fascinating to look at if you take a moment to look at them. These were some old paper dolls, and the texture is a little embossed too on the dresses and so on, so I just thought they were kind of fascinating. I think they're early 1900s or pre-1900 perhaps. And you just don't find things like that too often. And the little hats, they would go right over the head here, you know. So there are two different dolls and a few pieces of clothing.
Couple more fell.
These were back there, yeah. We sell sheet music, but it doesn't sell all that well. One time we had somebody come in, I think he was from the South, and he said he was going to buy some old sheet music to paper his bathroom. So that's the best use for it sometimes. But these were all about trains, and I had them with our little railroad section. There's a Judy Garland one, and waiting for the train to come in, and down by the station early in the morning with Dick Jurgens. At first I thought it looked like Dean Martin or somebody, but it isn't. This is all holiday postcards. A lot of them are Christmas and Valentine's and that sort of thing. And they seem to keep multiplying for us. I mean, not that we don't sell some, but they're kind of fascinating when you really study them. And there are well-known postcard artists, too, that people look for. There's an artist by the name of Clapsaddle. I know her. That was her last name. And there were quite a few others that were of note. These little folders, a little bit more than a postcard. These were some fairly early ones from the teens and 20s up through the 40s. Dairy stuff is kind of collectible. And so I bought, this is a butter container from, where is it now? It's from Richland Center, Wisconsin, which is down on the way toward Madison. And this is an old home brochure. And road maps, there's something that's just become more collectible in the last 10 years or so. I have another one. Oh yeah, here. This is one, the Manitoba official highway one from 1948, and a Gulf one from a similar time period. They particularly like those that have the logos of the gasoline and oil companies on them, but people buy others too. We were fortunate to get, one was at 1929, one that you bought recently at the advertising show.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was the,
Minnesota one.
what it was is that before the late 20s, your road maps were put out by map companies, and they were not illustrated, they were folded, they were black and white, and they were, say, Minnesota, Nebraska, and that, but no connection with an oil company, and you bought them. But in the 20s, then the oil companies started to print them up as a way to promote their station. And as a result, they became quite colorful and quite one. And road maps, pre-war road maps in nice condition are collectible, but particularly they like the 1929, 30, 31, 32, 33, those real early ones, because often they had an illustration of an automobile on the cover. And so it would be an early automobile. And they were free.
The way to gauge a lot of road maps is either by what type of automobiles there are on them, or if they have the population of the, what census it was, like was it 1930 census, 1940, 1950. Then you can get a pretty good idea of the dating of them. Not a real popular collectible, but some people like the old patterns, for instance, the ones that are quite old. That I have a couple with Halloween costumes also, which I don't think a lot of people make their own Halloween costumes anymore. But they're kind of fascinating, because anything Halloween is collectible. You may not have heard of the Marigold Ballroom in Minneapolis. I don't know, maybe you have. But these are a couple different coat checks. We have several different kinds of those.
I think we went there one time.
Could be. And then this is just a little brass, much corroded really, but a little metal type thing for identification also.
People-
with a number on it.
People like them. There's a lady that buys them and makes jewelry out of them. Add something to it. What I carry, of course, is Marigold Gardens coat check, but the number on it is 1932, and that's the year I was born. So, and I have a 39 for her.
There we go.
End of 39. Little oddities like this is a made in occupied Japan piece. Not really valuable at all, but people could buy it because they collect things for Yellowstone Park, which is this is Old Faithful, or they collect occupied Japan. But there's not a big interest in occupied Japan. There was a little more at one time.
Yeah.
Little old Jello molds. These are odd ones that I happen to have. There's only this one says Jello on it, but I think we have another one that says Jiffy Gel, which was a competitor. Yesterday I was looking at some of the recipe booklets we had, and I didn't bring any along, but we must have 10 different recipe booklets for Jello that were done over the years, you know, from the 1920s and on and on and on. I don't know how they could change them every year, but they did. A Watkins cookbook. Some of these had the orange cover. And there's a Watkins Collectors Society in Minnesota, but it's never really taken off like the Red Wing Collectors Society has. But the most interesting thing in here are the pictures of the old products, particularly relating to foods, because they're kind of fun to see that. A picture of the plant down there in Winona and so on. And of course it's Jacobs. It's one of the sons of the original Jacobs. What's his first name? That's the
Yeah. What?
That's the owner of Watkins now. What's the Jacobs?
Irwin.
Irwin's son, I think, isn't it?
Oh,
He's-
yeah, it's Irwin Jacob's son runs Watkins now.
This is an example of a poetry book. Not so much the kind that a lot of the young girls like, but it's kind of fascinating because it has poetry about well-known Americans in it. And the authors were Rosemary and Stephen Vincent Benet. Maybe some of the rest of you remember reading some of their poetry when you were in school also. The original Betty Crocker cookbook also came in the loose leaf style, which that didn't last as well. But I was delighted to get this one a couple weeks ago when somebody brought it in, because so many of them are in bad shape or they're really stained up because of what you were cooking that day. You know, whatever. But this one is a pretty neat one. One of the little, big little books, and it isn't a real collectible one because there's hardly anybody that remembers about the famous comic strip that it came from, because it's either Just Kids or Deep Sea Dan was the name of the comic strip, and it was from the 1930s, I guess, because that's when most of these originally came out. This is a 1940 exactly. But people just don't buy these as much as they used to. We had a Charlie Chan one that was in really good shape, which was kind of unusual. And I did sell it last Sunday when we did the toy show. And the guy that bought it got me down on the price quite a bit because he assured me that my price, of course, was way too high. And people buy a little fancy work a little bit now and then, crochet pot holders and other fabric items with embroidery and so on. But they're not that big a deal. I mean, you can have a beautiful display of it, and maybe once a month you might sell one or two, but they're fun anyway. Kitchen utensils, this one has a wood handle, which makes it more like the 30s or so. But some people buy those with the plastic handles or the Bakelite handles too. But if you really look, you can usually find the name of the company somewhere. There it is, right there. If you really look, you can find it. Couple of children's books, somewhat collectible, you know, they're kind of fun. This one was part of a series. This is an early little golden book, and it was one of the first 12, I guess. And it is, so it's considered a first edition. It's rated about $40 or so, but in real good condition. But I put this one at $30, but it's going to take a real collector to buy that one. And this is a somewhat more recent one. It doesn't have the barcode on the back, but it's a somewhat more recent one. But we have a customer that comes in, and she has bought a little golden book almost every time she comes in, because we'll have a few more. But then the last time she was in, she says, I have 1,000 of them now. She says, none of the new ones you showed me are ones that I need. So anyway, but there's still other people that look at them. And we had a customer one time a couple of years ago that bought a whole bunch of them that had to do with Disney characters. And so she worked at Disney World in Florida, and she was going to take them all down there and have the people that portrayed these characters sign them for her so that she had the connection. But she was really delighted to see all these different ones. It was really something to her to see them. Bought a couple spice containers. The newer ones that were made just before they started putting everything in paper or whatever, they're not as collectible. I mean, you can find a whole lot of those, but these were kind of different. This one is actually a mint tin, but it only cost 10 cents for the whole thing originally. And this is a McCormick's, but it's an older McCormick's, which was kind of cute. And of course the Watkins ones are collectible, but not as highly rated as some items are. This is a very small Tonka toy, and we have quite a collection of them. And if you know anybody that's interested in Tonka toys, you can probably help them out by selling them a few, you know. But this one happened to be dated, which I thought was kind of fun. It says Tonka Corporation 1978, and it is made in the United States. But people will buy some of these small ones. We have like $6.50 on it, so it isn't going to break the bank to buy it. Let's see what else we have here.
With this display right there.
Yeah, I'll tell a little bit about that. This is an old yearbook. Anybody know what high school in Minneapolis it was for? The Hesperian? It was for West High School. And I was going through it the other day and I thought, why is this mark in this one place? And it was where Clellan Card's picture is in here, 1923. And so the mark is still in there if you want to look at him. But he, of course, played Axel.
Clellan Card was on television for years. He also had a show that was at the Excelsior Amusement Park. But
he was a good friend of Don Stoll's of the Old Log Theater that we knew so well. And this had little straw-like Christmas ornaments in it. And when I had this box, I thought, should I burn this up or what should I do with it? But then I thought, I think I can use this to put some little things in. So this is just a little collection of things like fuses and old rulers and a compass and a whistle that says Neiman Marcus on it, and a match safe, and a little mentholatum, no, this is a Williams anti-pain ointment. Oh, that's nice. Williams anti-pain ointment. There's a little Nixon sticker in here, kind of not a button, but a sticker. And just some little oddities of different kinds that are kind of fun. A little Sammo's wooden nickel, things of varying ages. And so, if you have little things like that, you have to have something really to display them in, and that was something that worked. And something like this is a little Orphan Annie little cup, an Ovaltine cup, that you probably sent in for back in the late 30s or whatever it was. And at one time, more of these items that people my age or older would have bought were considered more collectible because a lot of those people were buying, but a lot of the people in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they're not buying so much anymore, or they're getting rid of their things. And so as a result, these things are not that easy to sell as what they were at one time. Roy Rogers things even, they sold out a whole museum of Roy Rogers things because people weren't that interested in seeing them. So times have changed in antiques and collectibles quite a bit. But if you're interested in any of the things, come up and take a look at them when you leave. Oh, the Hagmans. This is a little mirror. And Hagmans was a bar, I guess it was, on 329 Washington Avenue South in Minneapolis. And we were fortunate enough to get a whole bunch of these from a person who was apparently related to the man a number of years ago. So we kind of keep selling a few of them every now and then. But it's been fun looking at some of the things and talking about your items. And so if you have anything else to add or any other questions. Yes, these two books, I'll just tell you a little bit about them. Bob Williams was an author who lived in Excelsior. He worked at the Old Log Theater also, but he was quite a creative guy. And his son brought by some of the books that are still cleaning out some of the things. He died about 3 years ago or so. And the one of his books that it didn't sell quite as well as the others. This one is about an apartment in Minneapolis, and it's kind of a murder mystery. And the people come out to Excelsior on Christmas Eve, so that was how he connected with Excelsior. But he wrote two others that had a lot about Excelsior, but they were historical novels. They were not the real thing. Some people believed they were the real thing, but they were novels. But if we have anybody here who has a birthday in May, you could have a copy of this because we have quite a few copies that he left with us.
It's an interesting novel, and the murder that took place was quite famous. But what is interesting also, Bob Williams' son lives in an apartment building downtown, and where you buy the apartment, and the original name of the building was Ozark Flats. And it turns out that he owns and lives in the apartment where the murder took place.
Just by some strange circumstance.
Just by chance. But it was famous, and it's well written. Bob was a professional writer.
Do we have any May birthdays?
Any May birthdays? Okay, let's see. How about April birthdays?
Here's one.
There, okay. There you go, if you want it, pass it on to somebody else, but it's fun, it's fun reading. I mean, he was quite a writer. He wrote songs too a little bit, and he just did a lot of things. He was, as I say, he was employee of the Old Log Theater for many years. How about a June birthday? Anybody have a June birthday? Okay.
Well, was there another one? We just brought 2
Who else
copies.
have it? Oh, you can give it to her.
Oh, who was it? Was it you?
Somebody? Oh.
No, I thought I saw a hand go up over there. Have fun with it. Sorry they're not autographed, but he didn't autograph the boxes of them before he died.
It's one of those famous unautographed issues.
You're welcome.
Loretta,
Yeah.
at the end of the month, this month in Sunday afternoon, the Afton Museum has a map that's brand new, something
Oh.
that's very old.
Oh,
that they've
okay.
never seen before.
Oh.
And they're gonna display it.
Oh, okay.
Oh. All right.
Oh, that's
Any
interesting.
questions for these experts?
Of Washington County or?
Afton.
Of Afton itself, huh?
Oh.
Okay.
Well, this has been such a pleasure, and I don't even know how you hold all of this information in your head. You're like, what's that first name? Like, oh boy, I can't remember. So, thank you very much. Here's a token of our appreciation, and let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great job, thanks.